Russia and Ukraine have exchanged some of their heaviest overnight attacks in weeks as both sides launched large-scale missile and drone strikes. Ukraine's military says it targeted a Russian ammunition plant and oil refinery in the Bryansk region using long-range Storm Shadow missiles. According to sources, Russia responded with barrages on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, firing 28 missiles and over 400 drones. Meanwhile, Moscow also claims to have captured two more settlements, Pavlivka and Ivanivka, in the Zaporizhia and eastern Donetsk regions, as its forces continue to push along the front lines. Well, the escalation comes amidst uncertainty over a proposed peace summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, with Washington saying there are no immediate plans for the two leaders to meet. Professor Georgi Toloroya, professor of Russia Academy of Science, is joining us live from Moscow. Thank you very much for being with us on NewsX World. What is to be read into these latest strikes on both sides, Professor Toloroya? What has been the impact and the damage reports that you've got?
It's simply the war is going on. Before the peace is achieved, the war will go on. And nobody is going to stop the military activities unless there's a clear prospect for peace. And of course, you cannot determine the terms of the final agreement even before the talks have started. So when there are some conditions which are being suggested by EC for Trump-Putin meeting, that means there's no readiness for the real talks. That's very simple. So, okay, the war will go on. It may escalate. And today, Putin have taken part into the train of strategic nuclear force. That's part of Russian being prepared for any scenario. And if there's no meeting of Putin and Trump, well, that means the war will go on.
Yes, Professor Toloroya, how close or how far are we from a ceasefire?
We're not talking about ceasefire. Ceasefire is just a decoy for rearming Ukrainian force. So when anybody speaks about ceasefire, that means that just give us a break to rearm and get more reserves and get more armaments. That's not going to happen by itself. Any kind of stoppage to the military activities will be the result of the talks. And if there's no talks, there's no ceasefire.
Yes. Well, how do you react, though, to this supposed setback with the news reports now coming that there is no immediate plan for Putin and Trump to meet, despite earlier suggestions that there were?
Well, this I don't know, because that's the very sensitive issue. Nobody knows for sure, but Putin and Trump probably. But I understand there's a lot of activities on the behind the curtains activities, especially by the European leaders to prevent this meeting from happening, starting from the plain, blunt desire to physically stop Putin, not let him get to Budapest, and ending with the lots of behind the curtain talks to President Trump to dissuade him from meeting Putin. So I'm not sure what's going on. It may be the part of the play. Maybe the meeting will finally take place. Speaking frankly, I personally will be surprised if it will take place in Europe, because Europe has explicitly shows its inability and lack of desire, or rather opposition to having such a meeting in its own territory. So it may take place elsewhere, and I don't think that we should be absolutely pessimistic right now. But I have no answer to the question when and where it will happen.
Professor Toloroya, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that story. Moving on now, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is visiting Norway following an earlier stop in Sweden. He's scheduled to visit Brussels and London later this week. The visit focuses on diplomatic and military support for Ukraine. Zelensky met with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store in Oslo to discuss strengthening air defenses, potential joint drone production and other areas of cooperation. Norway has significantly increased its financial support for Ukraine. This comes as Russia has targeted various Ukrainian cities in overnight strikes. Russian strikes on gas and energy facilities in Ukraine have left hundreds without power, while several people lost their lives as well. President Zelensky says he backs U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal that the current front line should be the basis for negotiations with Russia, but added that he doubts President Putin will accept it.
We had more than 2 hours conversation on different topics with a lot of details. Yes, I think, the most important details what we spoke about, how to defend ourselves, how to have unity and security guarantees, and the place of the United States, which is important in security guarantees for the future of Ukraine, and how now to go to political decisions. I mean, peace negotiations, diplomatic way how to stop Putin. That's why we had a long conversation. After our conversation, you saw messages, public messages from Trump. He proposed stay where we stay and begin conversation. I think that was good compromise, but I'm not sure that Putin will support it. And I said it to President.
Mark Sutherland, geopolitical expert, is joining us live from London. Mark, what was on the agenda of President Zelensky's visit to Norway?
Really good to be with you. Well, the whole thing is about continue to build that consensus, and how he views it of Europe to back him after the invasion from Russia in February 2022. That is what this is all about, in my humble opinion. When he's expressed that view to say, well, where President Trump has said, we need to then ceasefire now, have these negotiations at the battle lines that have actually been drawn. And it was very interesting listening to your previous guest, the professor, and his point of view, where he's made the point, which is to say that people are trying to then we have this opinion, we draw up this agreement before we even start to even negotiate. And as he's made that point very, very clear, that ceasefire is then an opportunity for people to rearm, say where he's talking about the Ukrainian side, maybe on both sides. The number one thing that we want to see is to people to come round a table to stop this. And maybe what would be good is to be able to say, right, we'll have a discussion, as the professor has said, we'll have a discussion without any prerequisites on the table. Let's go around there and spend many, many hours, if not days, thrashing all of this out. And as I've just alluded to, with President Zelensky constantly going around European countries, is then wanting support for his nation. You've also talked about that in regard to Meloni of Italy turning around and saying that if we're going to take Russian assets out in regard to financial assets in banks, then it has to be amidst all the letter of the law. All these conversations, all of this chatter happening, and we all want this to stop. We want these people to come round the table. And as the professor has said, that maybe going to Budapest is not a good idea within Europe. So where do we go? The number one thing is, I've said it 4 times now in this conversation, let's get these people around the table and begin that discussion as soon as possible. Yudi.
Yes, Mark, also, as far as, this meeting is concerned, it comes also at a time when Russia has continued their attacks on Ukraine. Do you believe that is putting further pressure on Ukraine, to concede, in these negotiations and talks? How do you see those talks also proceeding, looking at this fresh round of fighting that has taken place in both regions?
Well, as your previous guest also said, the fighting is not stopping. The fighting is not stopping. And that is on both sides. We're very aware of the Ukrainians, what they have been doing in regard to drone technology and firing back at the Russian energy and infrastructure and holding their lines as best as possible. We just remind ourselves that the amount of men on the Russian side reported to be 1 million, and near that kind of extreme amount on the Ukrainian side as well, and all the devastation. It's continuing. I think that is what is also frustrating President Trump. But as the professor has laid out, he said it's all very well putting all these, say, prerequisites on the table. We need a peace agreement. We need to stop this. And to all of us on the outside, when you're continuing this war, then there doesn't in or the exchange militarily, then there doesn't seem any hope for actually getting to that point, getting to people to run the table. But I also, as he then said, that we do not know. This is, in one sense, this is the theatre that we are seeing. We do not know what is going on behind the headlines to really seek to push to get people around that table. Hence why President Trump a few weeks ago met President Putin in Alaska, also where he's talked about, I know the president because of from his first administration. So behind the lines, what we can do is pray and hope that people are genuinely talking to each other to get both sides around the table, but it looks like the military exchanges
Yes.
will still continue.